Hello everyone, welcome to my video. Today we're going to be turning this family room or my third living room into a bedroom. I currently have 5 bedrooms in this house and I would like to turn this room into a 6th bedroom. So I'm going to give this room some privacy by first adding a door. So I've never done anything like this, and I hope you guys can join me in my DIY project of installing a door for the first time. This opening that we are looking at right now is about 59.5 inches wide and is 94 inches tall. So your standard door doesn't come in those sizes. As far as double doors go, you either have 48 by 80 inches or 60 by 80 inches. So I'm gonna have to frame in a wall and then buy a 48 by 80 inch door. So join me as we attempt to do this for the first time. I want to say this is moderately difficult level of carpentry, and I don't have much carpentry experience, so a few mistakes will be made, but I hope my journey through this process can help you in any renovations that you would like to do. So I'm going to start by gathering my tools and materials and then storing them in my garage so we have everything that we need to make this project flow. So my career is a structural ironworker, and I have a lot of tools for that particular career, but most of these tools are for metalworking. Big iron is what we call it. So I'm gonna have to buy a lot of tools for this particular job because there's a lot of carpentry involved. So I had to buy lots of woodworking tools, measuring tools, and drywall tools. So the total price breakdown I'll give later, but for the most part it wasn't that bad. I think I spent $200 totals on tools, and that includes buying my very first miter saw. So my miter saw is by Ryobi. I got it from Home Depot, and it's my first miter saw. It's very small, so maybe one day I'll upgrade to a more industrious one, but it should serve me fine for this project. While I was getting my tools, I also purchased my door from Home Depot. The door was about $250, and it's the 48-inch one. I'm going to store it in the garage, and it's a split door jab, so it should be fairly easy to install. So wish me luck. So I'm a new homeowner, and the previous homeowner left behind a lot of handy tools. He left paint and some extra materials. So this bucket of paint is going to save me some money on paint that I have to do. And he also left behind a lot of extra floorboards, so that also helps me in saving some money and keeping consistency throughout the house. So this is my living room, and I have other tutorials of how I got it this way, but the previous homeowner did a custom job over the fireplace. He did some nice wood paneling that I loved, sold us the home, and I want to do the same thing over the new door that I'm installing. So I like his style, and I like to keep the style a little bit more consistent in the house. So not only do I like his style, but while cleaning out the basement one day, which I may one day renovate also, I noticed that he had a lot of extra materials related to the fireplace. So this is gonna save me a lot of money and save me the stress with trying to find the exact colors. So these woodland walls, peel and stick planks is what we're gonna use, and he left behind lots of different colors and extra materials. So this is great. It's gonna give a really nice consistent theme throughout the house. So I gathered all my tools and my materials, set up my miter saw. I got my lumber from Home Depot, about 7 boards, and I got 4 sheets of 1/2-inch drywall. The lumber is 96 inches long, so it should be ready for me to get cut. And please make sure you measure your lumber when you purchase it, because a lot of people use 2x4s as jargon, but lumber tends to not be 2x4 inches. It's actually smaller. Here's the final overview of the door. Although it's a 48-inch wide door, the rough opening is 50 inches by 82 inches. So before we get started, we have to take some final measurements. Right now I'm checking the opening for plumb and level. Nothing is perfectly square or level typically, so I'm just taking some final measurements so I know what surfaces to work off of. Luckily for me though, the sides are plumb, but my floor is not level, so I'm probably going to pull most of my measurements from the top, because the top for me happened to be level. House is fairly new, so it didn't settle out of place too much. Now I'm pulling measurements for center. Each side is slightly different. Some is wider and tighter, so I'm just getting a center mark for my studs and getting some more measurements. Measure 10 times and cut once. Now I'm pulling measurement for my first board, and I'm also going to measure each side because the floor is not level, so there's going to be 2 different measurements. So I'm getting ready to cut my first board. Pull the measurement, make the mark, and then you're going to use your speed square to get a straight line, and then X is the cutoff. I'm going to be doing a lot of this, so I just wanted to show you what goes into it. This is my first miter saw, so I'm learning how it works. Just a little extra clamps and things like that. Does it have a laser? Does it not? Just getting used to it. Right now I'm drilling pilot holes. Since I'm working by myself, I decided to drill pilot holes. If you have a partner, you can probably have them hold the pieces into place and then drill. But I decided to measure 3 inches and then drill the center. I'm also getting my screws started, since this is a one-man job for this part. So this is how you would do it if you have no help. You get the screw started, you set the board in place with one hand and you screw it in with the other. After getting the board straight, I'm going to drill my pilot hole and screw in the other side. I'm going to drill and screw in the middle. It's going to add strength to the frame and also stop the middle from sagging or drooping. So although the board is level, it has a little bit of roll in it. So I'm going to put some shims on the back side to get the roll out. I have my torpedo level to make sure it's level side to side. And I'm just going to bang in the shim, tighten up all the lumber, and then break the shim off. So this is how it looks on one side, and here's the other side. I got the roll out pretty easy, so it wasn't too bad. Now I have to prep the sides for the studs on each side, so I'm gonna chisel out the floorboards and I'm real delicate with the chisel so I don't do too much damage to my existing wall. So I'm just going to chisel each side at a time, clean my mess, and move on to the next step. Now it's time to get ready to cut the two side studs. These are going to be the longest pieces of lumber inside of the wall, so I got to make sure the measurements are on point because I can't make a mistake. I won't have enough wood to go around, so these cuts have to be nice and good. So I got my speed square, I got my measurement, and just cut nice and smooth. Lots of patience. I cut both boards while I'm out there. They have slightly different measurements since the floor is not level. So I'm drilling my pilot holes. Again, I'm working by myself, so pilot holes is the easiest way to do this. Once I get my boards into place, I screw them in, and I gotta check for level before the next screw to make sure that this is perfect. The more level and square your wall is, the easier time you'll have installing your door. So just pilot holes, drill a screw, level, repeat. Nice and simple. So I'm back cutting more studs. This time I'm going to be cutting a lot of lumber all at once. I'm going to be cutting small shims, small gaps, and the two main studs for the rough opening. So I'm pulling all my measurements, using my speed square to get everything straight. I use my lawnmower as a sawhorse, and just a lot of cuts in a row. Big pieces, small pieces, everything to go around. So I'm going to use painter's tape to position the small studs in between the larger studs, just to hold everything in place. It's the best way for me to get everything where I need it to be and to get the exact measurements of the rough opening for the door. And then when everything's lined up, my brother came through to hold a piece for me so I can drill my pilot hole, screw it in, get everything in, make sure you level in between your screws, and same thing for the other side. Once again, painter's tape to keep the studs in place. Gonna have my brother come through again. Hopefully no wood gets in his hair. He was complaining about it. And nice and simple. Right now I'm trying to get my rough opening exactly to 50.5 inches like the door says. So everything's looking pretty good. That's my beam for the top. It needs to be 80 inches high for the rough opening. I got my studs over the beam. Your studs should be every 16 inches, so I decided to have studs every 16 inches coming from both sides. And nice and simple. Perfectly square, lots of measurements. So we've reached the first checkpoint. The framing of the wall is officially finished. Now that the wall is framed up and square, it's time to start the drywall. Drywall is surprisingly expensive, so you want to make sure all your measurements and your cuts are good. I like to use one large piece so I don't have too many gaps or cracks later on. So I screw in the drywall and then I cut around it. Drywall is fairly easy to cut. You just cut one side, fold it in, and then cut the other side. It's pretty simple. So I'm going to be doing this about 4 more times on each side. This is me cutting the drywall in the garage before I bring it into the house, just to give you an idea of how I got the straight cuts. Use that $20 laser level. It's pretty nice. And as you can see, you just cut one side, fold it in, cut the other side. It's pretty easy. Drywall is very messy, so it's good to have things to protect your floor. Me sawing into the drywall with a drywall knife had dust all over the place. So just make sure you prepare your workspace so it's easier to clean up afterwards. But as you can see, you just cut into it, fold it out, cut the other side. Very easy. I'm drilling in the whole piece. This is a much better angle of what I was doing before. You can see how I fasten the piece, fasten the top into the studs, and then once the drywall is in place, I'm going to cut it to shape so it's all one solid piece. Another angle of the cut, this is the drywall saw doing its job. It's pretty cheap, maybe like $5. Dust all over the place, but cut, fold, and cut again. This is the last piece. I started to see that the end was near, so I was getting a little excited. But just like before, screw in, cut, fold, cut. Checkpoint 2, the wall is officially done. The drywall and the studs, everything's looking square, and the rough opening is now 50.5 inches by 82.5 inches, so I can shim the door properly for the rough opening. So I moved the door in from the garage. Now I have to cut all the packing material off of it. Keep the packing material on the door as long as possible. Keeps it square, keeps it intact, so it doesn't fall out of whack while moving it. But there's lots of staples and screws and nails that I have to take out. It's not a big deal. It's a split door jab, so that's the split jab. That keeps the doors in place so they don't swing open while you're moving it. More staples, and I recommend doing this part with help or a partner. I didn't have one, and I had a hard time getting the door in place. The door was swinging all open and getting all out of square and out of whack. So it just made it a little bit harder to install it later, but overall it wasn't too bad. So I nailed in a small finishing nail to give me a workable resistance, and I'm just gonna keep checking for plumb, checking for level, checking for square over and over again. Lots of small and subtle movements to get it right. Luckily my opening was pretty square, so it wasn't that bad. Now I'm going to take out the screws and the hinges and then replace some of the long screws. This is going to fasten the door to the rough opening to the wall that I built. And that's it. Putting in a door is not so hard. This is the split door jab, so I've got to put the jab into the other side. Very lightweight. Just snap it into place and then nail it into place. Paint any damage that you do. I use this tool to install the hole for the doorknob. Self-explanatory. Now I'm getting prepared for plaster. Got my tools, my spatula. Got my plaster. The hardest part of this project was the plaster. It's very messy, and you have to blend the new drywall with the old drywall. So there's lots of coats, lots of drying. The smell is pretty strong. It's just a headache. So much respect to people who do this for a living. Plaster is no joke. So I had to plaster and tape over the joints to make it look seamless. I did the best that I could, even though this was the first time I did it. But it took a pretty long time. It took like a day for just putting on the coat, putting on the tape, putting on the coat over the tape, and it has to dry in between coats. It was a long process, but it was worth it. It's mandatory. You have to blend the walls together in order to properly paint it and for it to look like a quality job. Now I'm going to put the blue painter's tape to get ready for paint. All the plaster is dry. I got extra paint from the garage, so I got to save some money on that. And I'm just going to do this for both sides. Painter's tape, paint, and I'm going to paint it blue to match the rest of the living room. This is the finished paint. Looks pretty decent. The wall is not perfect. It's my first wall, but I'm also going to add more finishing touches to give it a really nice professional look. So we made it to the third checkpoint. The wall is done, the door is installed, everything is painted. I painted the door white, installed the doorknob, did some caulking around the joints, cleaned up the area a lot of dust and debris, sawdust everywhere from all the work that's being done, but everything is looking pretty nice. Now it's time to get ready for the finishing touches, the final part of this entire project. So it's time to use all that extra material I had in the basement. The woodland wall, wood plank panels, the peel and stick. I got my miter saw. I'm gonna follow the same pattern that's over my fireplace. And it's just gonna be cutting, peeling, and sticking over and over again. It's just very simple. I cut the panels in the garage. I peel off the double-sided tape and I just stick them to the wall. Very easy. I like how it came out. I made sure that my very first row was perfectly level, so I took all the proper measurements. If you're gonna do anything like this too, make sure you do a lot of measuring. You don't want your panel styles to not be square, get out of whack, look funny. And it was nice. My wall wasn't perfectly flat, so the panels did a lot covering up some imperfections, and I'm really happy that it worked out that way. It's my very first door and it's my very first wall, and I think everything came out okay. So just kept cutting the sides. Now I'm starting to reach the finish line. These are the last pieces of the whole project. Just over and over again, just putting them in, peel and stick, nice and easy. And this is my last panel. I was so happy to reach this point. And we are finally done. Thank you so much for joining me in making this video. The whole project cost me about $650. That includes all the tools, the door, and the materials. I did have a lot of materials for free that was passed on, but overall I think it was a really good job, and I hope I helped you out on any future DIY projects you may start.